This is Wheelbearings. It's been kind of a quiet week, so we're up on episode 12. There's really not anything going on, Sam, so I figured it was a good time to podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm Sam of Buell Salmon.
All right, well, let's get into it. We got, actually, it's been a little while, so we have a few things to pick up on, and we can start with what we're driving. And I know that you just handed in the Genesis G80, and so I wanted to actually see if you shared my impressions of that with how impressed I was with that car.
Yeah, absolutely. For the most part, I think it's a really wonderful car. Especially, at the price point when you compare it to some of the German and Japanese competitors in the segment. It drives really well. The one I had was the V6 with the 8-speed automatic, and there's just a lot of things to really like about that car. I mean, it's incredibly roomy. It's good looking. I like the proportions and the style that they've done on the second generation Genesis. The car formerly known as the Hyundai Genesis,
yeah, but we're not supposed
which is
to say
now the
Hyundai
G80.
anymore. Yeah, Alex Nunez was
That's
like,
right.
hey, keep Hyundai away from that name.
Well, I mean, the Genesis brand is still part of the Hyundai Motor Group, along with the Hyundai brand and Kia. All three of those brands, are really producing some fantastic cars now, and trucks and utilities. Yeah,
and that's interesting. It kind of ties in with a question we had on Facebook. We also had some other questions, which we'll get to at the end of the show. But we had a question on Facebook, was what automaker is sort of hitting on all cylinders and why. While their profits may be a little bit off from where they want it to be, Hyundai and Kia are really, their product is fantastic lately.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really a product in the lineups of any of the three brands now, that I think are subpar. I think, the only issue that Hyundai's having right now, and it's what has led to their sales kind of stagnating in the last couple of years, even as the market has grown, and led to the departure of Hyundai of America's most recent CEO, Dave Zakowski, in December. It's just been the product plan that they've had, the lineup that they've had. While the vehicles are great, it's very car heavy. There's not a lot of, you don't have a lot of utilities in their lineup. And, right now that's where all the action is, especially in the smaller utilities. Hyundai's got, the Hyundai brand, they've got the Santa Fe Sport and the Tucson. And they're one of the last major brands that haven't yet introduced a subcompact utility along the lines of the Honda HR-V or the new Nissan Rogue Sport.
But see, this is where I have a bit of, and we can get back to the G80 shortly. They actually do have a pretty solid lineup. I think of them all as one company. So Kia to me is sort of, they're like Plymouth to Hyundai's Dodge, if you will. But they seem to have the right size crossovers for this market. They've got the Santa Fe, which is a bigger 3-row. They've got the Santa Fe Sport, which is a little tighter. They've got the Tucson, which is, the right size. And then you jump over to Kia and you've got the Sportage and you've got the Soul, which is, sort of fits right in. And the Soul is actually I feel like the Soul is notched right between the HR-V and the CR-V.
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing with the Soul in particular is I'm not sure that American consumers really see it as much of a crossover, or a utility. I think it's more, more along the lines of, the departed Nissan Cube or the old Scion XB.
Okay.
So I think that's the way consumers see it. And so maybe they're not necessarily seeing it for what it is, which is unfortunate because it's actually a really fun little car to drive. It's really well built.
I love the Soul. And it just keeps getting better. They've added a turbo version. There's an EV version. It's a killer product.
The Soul EV is actually that's one of the surprises of the mainstream EV market, of the the sub 100-mile range EVs that are on the market today, that's actually probably one of the best out there.
And so we've taken a complete left turn from the Genesis G80. So what impressed me about that was...
that's it. But the thing is, for Genesis, you look at the Genesis brand, it's trying to compete with the likes of Lexus and Infiniti and to a lesser degree, BMW and Mercedes and Audi. And right now they only have two vehicles and they're both big sedans. They don't have any utilities at all in the Genesis brand. And that's something, since they launched Genesis as a separate brand a year ago, it has kind of struggled a bit. And, if you look at the other premium brands where they are really, knocking it out of the park is on sales of utilities. Their car sales, have, their car sales of other premium brands have done fine, but it's really the utilities that are really cranking up the volumes and the profits right now. And that's what Genesis needs to add to their lineup fairly quickly.
Yeah, and I think there's probably acutely aware of that. And they're launching with the product they have. It was an easier leap to go from Genesis, which they had re-engineered, for 2015, or was it 14? I forget.
I think it was 14.
But that car was pretty new. That was more like a branding exercise to just change the nameplates. I'm sure that they're working on stuff in terms of a utility in that
no doubt about it.
And I guess you could draw the parallel too while you're trying to spin the story and tap dance while you have no utility product to say, you know what, Lexus launched a very successful brand on the back of pretty much a single large sedan and a smaller.
Yeah, but that was 25 years ago.
Yeah, listen, I'm just trying to give the PR talking points.
If you look at Lexus's lineup today, they have more utilities than they have cars, and they have everything from the NX at the small end up to what's their version of the Sequoia. The GX is the Land Cruiser.
Oh no, the GX is the 4Runner. Like the GX 460.
Yeah, well, whatever.
And then they have the LX.
They have so many SUVs in their lineup. It's crazy.
So it's NX, RX, GX, LX.
Right.
And the LX is the Land Cruiser, I believe. And the Land Cruiser is no cheapie either. The Land Cruiser is this weird little odd man out.
But by far and away, the top selling nameplate in the Lexus lineup today is the RX, and it has been for many years.
Yeah. And so what do you think that Genesis has in the works? Or do you think that they're going, a large 3-row crossover or something that's more like a traditional SUV? Because, they did make the Kia Borrego, or however you pronounce it, not too long ago.
My guess is that we'll probably see something in a midsize crossover as the first entry. And it'll probably be based on it'll probably form the basis for the next generation Santa Fe. And the Santa Fe and Santa Fe Sport are, they've been around, they're nearing the end of their current life cycle as well. So they're due for a redesign in the next year or so. So my guess is before the end of this year, we'll probably see a midsize Genesis utility that, then pieces of that form the basis of the next gen Santa Fe next year.
And if the Tucson is any indication, it's going to be really, really competitive. Even as a Hyundai, let alone a Genesis. What impressed me the most, I think, about the Genesis G80 was just how fussed over it felt. Everything. It wasn't like just a collection of stuff sort of dumped into a car-like shape and, slapped on the sales floor. Everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of attention to detail.
Yeah. And it just operates like it was all meant to operate together. Thinking back to even the K900, you're getting the K900 now, which is the original Genesis. It doesn't feel like that. And that was a good car for, first effort
in 2009.
Yeah. It was one of those, I remember seeing the original Genesis on the show stand, the prototype on the show stand in New York. And, just thinking like, wow, that car is, really impressive. It's well styled. It's, clearly they're not messing around. Its spec sheet looks pretty impressive. And when it came out, it was impressive, but it wasn't quite there, They don't have that problem anymore. So
right.
Yeah. And what was the sticker on yours? Did you look at it?
You know what? They didn't give me a Monroney with this
I hate
one.
when that happens.
Yeah. So I'm actually not sure.
Well, we'll just punt and say it was like, I don't know, 65, because it's probably somewhere around there.
Yeah, it was probably around 60. I mean, the G80 starts at 41,000,
which is crazy. Think about that.
Yeah, I know.
41,000. You could push a Camry up that high. It's a hell of a Camry.
And the one I had was all-wheel drive, so that bumps it up to 44,000. And even the V8 is only 54,000. So I doubt this one was over 50 grand.
That's crazy.
Which is, I mean, that's a bargain.
Yeah.
It's great. Or actually, the way they would prefer we describe it as great value.
Well, and that's what I try to.
You don't want to describe it as cheap.
Right. Working in advertising, I'm very attuned to that. It is a great value because it certainly doesn't feel cheap. It's got, again, that attention to detail. It's a leather and Alcantara lined interior. It's everything's,
and even the wood trim. One of the things that Genesis uses is they have a matte finish on the wood, which I really prefer. I don't like the look of really high gloss woods inside a car. I really prefer the matte finish, and this one had the matte finish wood, and it was really nice.
And the amount of tech that's in there too is, again, it's just, even I noticed even the buttons on the center stack, they feel like they're flocked or they're coated in some way, because you can do plastic switchgear, right? Like every car has it, and you silk screen on the legend, the words or the little pictogram. These in the G80, it feels like there's an extra coating over the top, and I'm sure there is, and it's just like this. Everything feels like smooth and silky and tactile in some way, and it's again that's something that you notice in cars like the BMW 7 Series and stuff, and it gets even more ridiculous in cars like that with the ceramic control package and stuff. But and
as you were talking, I just priced one out and came to 53.8 including delivery.
That is a ridiculous amount of car for that money.
Yeah, I mean, a comparably equipped BMW or Mercedes, like say a 5 Series or an E-Class, is probably going to cost you at least $20,000 more.
So would you say that Hyundai's actually probably not making any money on these cars priced as they are?
No, I think they're probably making a fairly healthy margin. Just not as much of a margin as some of their competitors would be.
Really, okay. BMW builds a 5 Series. Hyundai builds a G80. They probably cost about the same to build. Yes? No? Sort of?
Yeah, they're probably in the same ballpark.
So BMW's making that much more of a margin?
Yeah.
Wow. Damn. Well, I mean, BMW is actually, they were the most profitable automaker for however many years, right? For
between them and Porsche.
Yeah,
Porsche's always had ridiculous margins, but that a big part of that is because, and one of the places where the Germans in particular have really learned how to make a lot of money on their premium brands is through personalization programs.
Yeah.
So, you have, if you go through the configurators on their websites or go through their product catalogs, you can build out, a stock version of any of their vehicles. But then, for example, BMW has the individual program. And so you can go into your BMW dealer and sit down and basically spec out virtually anything in their lineup, pretty much any way you want. You want a special color? No problem. For the right price, They will paint the car any color you want. You want a particular type of leather? Not a problem. Same thing with Porsche. That's why, you can easily, bump up a 911, to even a non-turbo 911, to well in excess of $200,000.
Yeah, I priced myself out like a pretty base model 911 Targa, but the brown paint was a little bit more. The leather in the interior was a little bit more. It was like 120, and I hardly had any options on it.
Right, and you can, like I said, you can get any of those pieces customized. You can get, you want something to match the drapes in your living room. Not a problem. They, just take them a swatch and they will mix some paint and paint the car for you any color you want.
Yeah. So then there's that niche that they've certainly burnished their brands to the point where people want them and they want to, basically use them as a sketch pad for their moneyed creativity. So then who is the G80 for? Like, for me, I think the mark for this car is somebody who has maybe, and Hyundai admits as much, is somebody who's done those cars, who's had the Mercedes, who's had the BMW, doesn't really care so much anymore about the status of the brand, but they don't need the flash. They want something that, is maybe a little more restrained, a little different, but that still has, some real style to it. And, that was something where the first generation Genesis was maybe lacking a little bit, was, in that sophisticated style. The second generation model, the G80 and also the G90, look a lot more sophisticated and upscale. Especially with that yeah. I mean, with that big grille on the front, but also the proportions, you look at it in profile, it's got that longer hood, the coupe-like roofline, and it looks sportier. It doesn't have the conservative look that the first generation model did. And so it definitely has a degree of sophistication that wasn't there before. And, that says, I know what I'm driving, and this is a car that has all the characteristics of some of the best cars in the world, but, I don't need to shout it to the world. Yeah, I get that. And, it's all, there are other buyers besides the people who've actually done that and are confident enough, have the German cars and are confident enough to, come back and just be like, yeah, I just want a solid car. Like, if you were to drive this back to back with something like a 5 Series and an E-Class, I'm not going to be insane enough to try to compare it with an S-Class. that's slightly different. But and after you actually get past the E-Class, it's sort of a diminishing returns. You enter the land of make-believe where, the options and the features in those cars is just so ridiculous to begin with. You're just like, why would I even want anything more than the sort of middle of, the solid hunks of red meat that's in the middle of those lineups. So, yeah, I mean, I came away from the G80 very impressed. And it sounds like you did as well. And then you jumped out of that into another car that actually is sort of on everybody's mind because it's kind of a little icon on its own. The Honda Civic Sport hatchback.
Yeah, so the hatchback, the Civic hatchback launched a few months ago, and one of the unique trim levels to the hatchback that's not available in the sedan is the Sport, which gets you, I think, about 6 extra horsepower. First of all the 2017 Civic hatchbacks come exclusively with the 1.5 liter turbo that debuted last year in the sedan, and the Sport gets a few extra horsepower, a bump up from 17 to 18-inch wheels, and front splitter and some side sills. So it looks a little more aggressive, and it's got twin outlet center mounted exhaust in the rear bumper. So it's I really like the Civic hatchback. And in fact, my wife and I are just waiting on one in the right configuration to arrive at our local dealer to trade in our Jetta TDI for that. But the Sport that that I got today it has the 6-speed manual. But one of the things about the Sport is, in terms of its interior trim, it's basically the base level LX. So you don't get the nice touch display radio with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support, no sunroof. So it's a little more basic, but it still drives great. And Honda makes fantastic manual gearboxes, and this thing is just so slick shifting, and in combination with the 1.5 turbo, it's a fabulous powertrain.
Even though the turbo changes the Honda powertrain thing for me. For me, a Honda 4-cylinder has always been very smooth, willing to rev, and not necessarily a lot of power delivery down low on the tack. Not bad, but not certainly, low end torque was not their thing. And the turbos that I've driven in the Civic kind of flip that around, where they don't really want to rev. And I should say I haven't had any with the manuals. So, well,
it actually revs pretty quick. It just runs out of steam sooner. So, instead of revving to 7,500 RPM, it'll rev to 6,500. But it gets there just as quick as any other Honda 4-cylinder. And, for around town driving, that low end torque is, just feels so much better.
Yeah, it definitely, the power delivery matches, I think, what people prefer. The other thing I didn't like about that turbo engine is its note is it doesn't sing the sweet song that Hondas have sung.
Yeah,
that's true. Droney.
That's true.
Yeah, I kind of splitting hairs.
But it's not bad.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you can,
it's certainly something I can live with and will be living with for the next several years.
Yeah, and it's certainly a solid choice. And after a while, you just kind of get used to it. But I was shocked to just kind of notice and be like, wow, this really sounds, it doesn't sound to me like the Honda engines I've known and loved. But then again, it's a new kind of Honda engine to get to know and love, right? I'll be
absolutely
about that.
And we'll be seeing a lot more of this kind of engine in Hondas in the next few years. I'm sure when the next gen Accord arrives and within the next year or so, it's probably going to have, I would guess, probably it'll probably use this 1.5 turbo as the base engine and maybe a 1.8 as a replacement for the V6.
We're back to a 1500cc Accord.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, they're going to come out with the CVCC badge or something.
But of course, the original first generation Accord, was a smaller car than today's Honda Fit.
Yes. Yeah. But and like the big thing for that, it's so funny to go back and read like about the Accord and how mind blowing it was. Cause it's kind of like it is now, like everything's high quality. Everything's presented well for a very good price. And very meticulously engineered and assembled. And the Accord had like a radio with a tape deck as standard equipment. And that was a big deal.
Hey, that was 1976.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy to see.
The Civic doesn't even have a CD player in it.
Yeah. Well, who listens to CDs anymore? Only
I know
old iconoclasts like me who can talk about the benefits of
well, you probably still use cassettes.
I don't.
Or eight tracks.
We're talking like half-inch 8 tracks or a 1-inch 8 track, like an Ampex MM1000. All right. I'm getting geeky. So anyway, I've been driving a couple of things because it's been a little while.
Yeah, what do you got?
So last week I had a Lincoln MKC, and it's nice enough. It's a competent luxury crossover, and this is in Black Label.
It's a really nice Escape.
Yeah, that's why I just feel like Lincoln needs to do better. Even in Black Label trim, it has to compete with a whole bunch of other crossovers, luxury crossovers that are also very good and with better established brand reputations too. I mean, even Cadillac at this point is kind of got more cachet than Lincoln. And this is one of Lincoln's best products. Because overall it's a solid attempt. The interior is nicely finished. The styling the exterior styling is nice. The problem I had with it was really it's an Escape. Why buy the Lincoln? Especially when you look at the price. Like this was nudging 60, and I'm just looking at it.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean it was a little breathtaking.
When I had an MKC about a year and a half ago, it was just over 50, and that seemed like a lot.
Yeah, because I mean, the stuff that's good about the MKC is mostly the stuff that's good about the Escape, right? It's a solid platform. The handling performance are decent. The MKC does have the larger EcoBoost, the 2.3 liter. So it does have plenty of power, but that's not what you don't really need it. The 2 liter would have been fine. But it's a way for them to differentiate, I suppose. And it's, for its size, it feels like it has, a decently spacious layout. Although it's still not that big.
One of the things that struck me about the MKC when I drove it a while back was how quiet and refined it felt. I mean, driving on the highway, it was almost silent in the cabin. What did you think about that? Did you notice that?
Yeah, I did. I noticed I in Black Label trim, the cabin is beautifully finished and it's quiet. It is. It's very nice inside, nicely finished. I also noticed that, it has better discipline in sport mode. And I did like that in sport mode, you could select normal performance and performance, the sporty chassis, because it didn't really get harsh. It just seemed to have better body control. And it was kind of a subtle thing. So I'm not sure how much of that was like placebo effect, where I'm expecting it to have better body control in sport mode. And so I thought it did. But it just seemed to, snub body motions better. And while you put it in normal, and normal filters out some of the high frequency stuff a little bit better, it also felt like that was at the expense of head toss a little bit, and just it felt squishier in normal. And so I almost felt like the sport chassis settings should be normal for it. Once I figured that out, and again, like I'm sure it has the computer controlled dampers.
Yeah,
it's a subtle difference. I really didn't like the transmission all that much. But it was okay, I guess. Every transmission now is really reluctant to give me a downshift, and I just don't like that. And so, I'll wind up in something older, and you give it a little squeeze on the pedal, and it gives you the downshift. There's fewer gears, so that's one thing. With modern 8-speed or 7-speed automatic has a lot to choose from. So does it drop 1? Does it drop 2? Does it just unlock the torque converter? There's a bit of dithering going on, and then there's also, I'm sure there's filtering of the pedal inputs, so that if you sneeze or something and you push really hard on the pedal, it looks for sort of like, oh, do they really mean it? Are they holding the pedal down? Are they pushing the pedal further? Are they being aggressive? Then it gives you the downshift. I don't like that second guessing. So.
And I would guess that we're probably going to see the MKC and the MKX both upgraded, probably for 2018 models later this year, with the new 9-speed that Ford co-developed with GM.
Yeah, and we'll see how that does. Honestly, I'm kind of picking on a very minute part of it, and backing up, the MKC is, it's well styled, and it's probably the only successful instance of that sort of bow wave grill, which is going to go away. I want to see what happens to its nose when it gets the new Lincoln corporate face.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how both the C and the X take to that new face.
Yeah, and overall, I feel like the MKC reminds me of the Audi Q5, and that's not a bad place to be.
And that's not a coincidence. I mean, they were directly aiming at the Q5 with that car.
But at the end of the day, what really sets it apart is styling and its larger EcoBoost engine. So I find it hard to recommend the MKC over just a really nice Escape. But I feel like they're not necessarily the same thing. I was when the MKC first came out, I had actually an actress on one of my shoots, and she rolled up in an MKC, and it was like new at that point. And I was like, "Oh, how do you like it?" I hadn't even driven one. And she was saying, "Yeah, it's great." They gave her a phenomenal deal on it, like a lease deal, because it's Lincoln,
right?
And she was looking for something that wasn't like a GLK or a Q5 or whatever. The Macan hadn't come out yet at that point, I don't think, or wasn't really on her radar. I forget which, but she was just like, and around here in the Boston area, Macans are like roaches. They're everywhere. So, premium compact SUVs are a thing out here, and I don't see too many MKCs, so I'm not sure how successful they're being with it. But it's just, I don't know what Lincoln is really selling besides Matthew McConaughey. It's almost like Lincoln's afraid of its own shadow. Like they don't have enough. They're not swaggering enough with this vehicle, and it is a really good premium compact crossover. It is a, it's in a competitive set. I get it, but it's also, it has some things to recommend it. Sync 3 is pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. You do get used to it. And overall there's a uniqueness to the Escape and the Lincoln version of the Escape that sort of sets it apart from some of the other competitors, just because it's the Lincoln way versus the BMW way or whatever. So I'm not sure how many they're going to move. If they needed to rebuild their brand on the back of this vehicle, they need to make more noise about it.
Yeah, well, and sales of the MKC have dropped off pretty dramatically over the past year, especially since the MKX launched. The MKX is actually doing a lot better than the MKC. So it's struggling a bit, and hopefully, we'll see what happens when they do a refresh. If the refresh of the MKC comes this year, that might get things kickstarted a little more.
Yeah, and the MKX that's a masterful sort of rejiggering of pieces you mostly already had. It's styled like an all new car, and it's that's the MKX we've known for quite a while. But it looks substantially different. It has the 2.7 liter EcoBoost in it, and Lincoln has a solid crossover lineup. Crossovers and SUVs, they've really,
and they've got more coming.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a little baffled why they're not pushing it enough. But then again, each one of those vehicles is a Ford product.
Right.
So while you can make more profit on the Lincoln, you can probably move more iron on the Ford. So are we chasing profit versus volume, or are they just? Well,
I think one of the things I think that's happening is I think they're actually selling more of those now in China than they are here. Much as Buick, is more successful in China than they are in North America.
Well, let's see how long that lasts.
So, yeah.
And I'm just gonna gloss right over that and talk about the other thing I drove, which was phenomenal. I do have to say, I had a Chrysler Pacifica limited. I apologize for the next person who gets it, because the interior of this smells like marijuana. And the reason why is because we had a shoot at a medical marijuana grow facility, and I used the Pacifica. The Pacifica showed up the day before the shoot, and I was like, sweet, I'm going to put all the gear in it. And so it's fantastic. It's stow and go seats, and the back seat powers down, and I filled it up. We didn't have a ton of gear, but I had, some Kino flows. I had a cart in there. I had all my camera support and, C-stands and my grip kit and stuff. So we put some good gear in the back. It was sort of still lightly loaded, but it was nice to have the space. And so we spent about 6 hours in this marijuana grow facility shooting, all their grow rooms and their packaging operation and everything. And very tightly controlled, by the way. So, but, you spend enough time in that environment and you just absorb the odor. So all the gear went back in the car. And then I drove back to the office, and I left the gear in the car because I had some things.
Let it permeate the rest of the vehicle.
It was mostly like I have to get back for a meeting, and so I ran into the meeting, and then I ran back out to get the gear, and I just opened the driver's door, and I'm just like, wow. And even now, like I'll get in and be like, yeah, it smells a little funky in here.
Yeah, that's your story, and you're sticking to it,
absolutely,
right?
Hey, it's legal in Massachusetts. It's legal, and they're setting up a dispensary, and yeah. So, but beyond that, even if you're not high, the Pacifica is a really good van. I feel like it's the best.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I had one a couple months ago, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, my kids love it. They love minivans, which is the weirdest thing, because they're like, Dad, I want to have a minivan someday. And I'm like, I have to say, as a sort of car enthusiast, I get it. Like the van is just, it's got great visibility. It's very comfortable. Again, this is the limited, so this is a $50,000.
Right, but I'm sure that how old are your kids?
11 and 8.
Yeah, so I mean they're the perfect age to also take advantage of all the techie features that are in this thing.
The games.
You get the games that are built into the screens and the back of the front seats. You get remote controls there for those. It's there's so much cool stuff that they've built into it that makes it perfect for families.
Yeah, well, and the power sliding doors, the kids love that because they can just hit the thing and it'll open on its own, and then they can hit the button and it'll close. They love the captain's chairs in the second row. They do love the games. It keeps they'll get in, they'll sit down. First thing they do is swing open the screens and start playing with the games. It just feels like a car that was designed for families by people who really understand how families are going to use their vehicles. And I understand that the older caravans were the same way, and the town and country were the same way. But what's different is that everything has been given an upgrade. The platform is really solid. The materials are really, really good. I stepped out of that Lincoln, and there were some areas like the surrounds of the door handles on the Lincoln. They were black plastic, like the panel that has the door pull and the power lock switch. It looks like it came straight from an Escape on the MKC. In the Pacifica, there's a metal bezel around it. Just subtle touches like that. And like whoever picked the materials and the interior design for the Pacifica did a fantastic job, at least in limited trim. It's beautiful in there, and the ergonomics are really good, and so it's a really solid upgrade that puts it at the front of the pack. And that's hard to do in a pack that includes, the Odyssey, that's probably the best driving minivan, but not necessarily the one you want to live with every day unless you want to punch the screen in the middle of the dashboard. Or this, I'd been recommending the Sienna for years because for me, it just felt like the best compromise. It's not quite as sharp in terms of reflexes as the Odyssey, but it's a minivan. Like, do you really want something that sharp? That it's quieter than the Odyssey. It's a little squishier, a little softer. And it still has a big V6 that's a rocket. So that all of those things.
And now they have a plug-in hybrid version as well.
And all-wheel drive. Can
you still get all-wheel drive? I thought that was discontinued.
It might have been, but for a while it was the only. They're still advertising the all-wheel drive Sienna here in New England. I don't know.
Oh, in the Sienna. I thought you were talking about in the.
In the Pacifica. No,
in the Pacifica.
Yeah, no, you can't get all-wheel drive in the Pacifica yet, but I think they're talking about it.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we see an electric all-wheel drive version of the hybrid.
Well, that's totally the way to do it.
Because you don't have to deal with running a drive shaft to the rear axle. You can just stick an electric motor in the rear axle, the way for example, Lexus does on the RX hybrid. That it's a much more convenient way to do it.
Yeah, and it was a very Chrysler-y week over the last week. So I put actually more miles on the Pacifica than I generally put on a press car because I went up to the Challenger GT launch up. So that was Portland, Maine, and then we drove across Maine.
One of the rare occasions when you have a media drive program for a muscle car in the snow.
Well, it's because the Challenger GT is all-wheel drive, and we can talk about that. It was just, Chrysler has they got some really, really detail-oriented, hardworking people on their most solid products. I noticed, as I was driving, because I put a bunch of miles on the Challenger too. I was like, man, this car is comfortable. It's quiet. And I got back in the Pacifica, and I had to drive it all the way out of Maine into, out from Portland back to, central Massachusetts. So that's no joke of a drive either. It wasn't fatiguing to drive either of those. So, the old caravans they'd felt very long, and like the back end wasn't quite following the front. That's been engineered out. And the Pentastar doesn't struggle quite as much as it felt like with the older vans. Some of that's just tuning and the transmission calibration and stuff. But yeah, Very, very impressive first experience with the new Pacifica. So I think I babbled enough about that. We should cover some stuff.
All right. So you want to talk about the Challenger first, or what I drove last week?
I've been talking for a while. Why don't you talk? And you actually talked to some other folks too. But you went and drove the Chevy Bolt.
Yeah. So I went out to Northern California, out to the Bay Area to spend some time with the Chevy Bolt, which is GM's new 200 plus mile range electric vehicle, mainstream priced electric vehicle. And, it's the first, relatively affordable EV that'll go 200 miles on a charge, coming at least a year before the Tesla Model 3. And, what was interesting is I got to drive it on some of the same roads, in and around Silicon Valley, where I originally drove the Tesla Roadster almost 9 years ago, exactly to the day. Before I drove the Bolt, and then same place I drove the Model S last spring when I was in that part of the world, and compared to certainly you're not going to compare the Bolt to the Roadster, but frankly, driving through some twisty mountain roads and then into San Francisco. I would arguably say that the Bolt is a better car for both of those scenarios.
Really?
Yeah, it's a really good, solid car. It's officially rated at 238 mile range, and based on the driving we did over several hours last Tuesday, that's definitely a very believable range number. We drove from Palo Alto up over the mountains over to Half Moon Bay, and then up along the coast into the city of San Francisco, and then around San Francisco. And one of the things that the GM's done on the Bolt, which you'll hear a little bit more about in one of the interviews I did with Adam Heisel, who is the calibration engineer for the propulsion system, was the way they calibrated the regenerative braking. But so they've got two modes for the regenerative braking. The shifter, you've got the standard drive mode, and when they do the certification testing for EPA to get the official range number, they only do that in drive mode. So that's where the 238 mile range comes from. But then there's also the low mode, which, a lot of plugins and hybrids and EVs have, something like a low mode, like, for example, a Prius, it's actually labeled as B for braking, for extra regenerative braking. But, what it does is low mode gives you basically maximum regenerative braking. So you can, when you put it in low, you can basically drive it all the time with one pedal. You almost never have to touch the brake pedal. And it uses all regen to slow the car down, except for emergency braking. If you need to do an emergency stop, then you're going to slam on the brake pedal, and then it'll use the friction brakes. But what the engineers I talked to said that if you drive around, especially in the city, if you drive around in low mode and just get a little, learn to drive with using just the accelerator pedal, you'll actually get significantly more range than than the official number. They wouldn't say exactly how much, but it's definitely notable. And just to give you an idea of what it was, during one leg of our drive route, we went about 10 and a half miles around downtown San Francisco from the Golden Gate Bridge to our lunch stop at a restaurant in the southeast part of the city. And over the course of that, I drove it in low mode, up the hills and down the hills, and it only used up 3 miles of range off on the gauge.
Well, that's kind of also a perfect place to be is up in that area.
Yeah.
There's so many hills where you can just regen for quite a while as you.
Yeah, absolutely. Between the hills and, just the fact that you've got start and stop traffic, it's an ideal location for using an EV. But, the thing about this thing, about the Bolt, and why I say it's arguably better in a lot of ways than the Model S, especially, in the twisty mountain roads. The Model S is a huge car.
That's true.
I mean, on the outside, it's a really big car. Not so big on the inside. In fact, the passenger volume of the Model S is actually about 1 cubic foot less than the Bolt.
Is that but wait, they have the jump seats.
Yes, but those don't count as passenger volume. That's in the cargo space.
Oh, so that's cadaver volume, or?
Yes. The passenger volume in the first and second rows in the Model S is 94 cubic feet, and the Bolt is 95 cubic feet. Where the Model S has an advantages in overall cargo space because they've got that longer rear end and also the front trunk, or the frunk as their fans like to call it.
Put that in perspective, though. 95 cubic feet. That's a mid-sized sedan, right? That's
Yeah, that's typical of most midsize. Actually, it's actually on the small side for a midsize sedan. A lot of midsize sedans, like for example Ford Fusion or Hyundai Sonata, are actually closer to 98, 99 cubic feet.
Like 99. Okay, so that's more like a let's see. I'm trying to find an analogy. Prius size, Jetta size. No, Prius is a
it's about Prius size.
Yeah, but Prius has that big hatch, so it's actually deceiving. The Prius is actually quite useful because it has of its
and so is the Bolt. You've got a big hatch. So you got 95 cubic feet of passenger volume plus another 17 cubic feet behind the rear seats for cargo space. So it's a very usable car, but it's a full foot shorter than the Model S. So it makes it a lot easier to maneuver around in the city, and also a lot more fun to drive on twisty roads because it also weighs about 1,000 pounds less than a 60 kilowatt hour Model S, even though it's got the same battery pack size.
Well, that's the thing that I was waiting for, the Bolt, and it just, that the big automakers are getting into it, and they have the resources and the know-how. Tesla had to build a car company from scratch, and they've done an amazing job.
Oh yeah, and if it wasn't for Tesla, the Bolt probably wouldn't exist, and a lot of other cars would not exist today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you got to give Tesla credit.
No, and that's right. That's not where I'm going. I'm just now that GM has committed, they're bringing the full strength of GM to it, where those folks really know how to engineer a car, and they don't have to learn as they go. Like they've got it down. They make some solid vehicles, gas powered, electric powered, whatever. So it's kind of it's almost like that they're gonna have really a solid car and the resources and the wherewithal to put it into development of a solid electric powertrain. Although Tesla's powertrain is no joke either. So
oh no, absolutely not. And Tesla does have an advantage in terms of total performance, or at least in terms of acceleration. Their vehicles do produce more power and it'll accelerate quicker, but the Bolt is no slouch, 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds.
That's so much. That's so plenty fast enough. I mean,
absolutely.
This whole thing with all of the electric cars being super expensive luxury sedans that do 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds is idiotic.
Or, making a big deal out of the fact that, one company's car does it in 2.39 seconds, and then Tesla comes out and does it in 2.389, thousandth of a second faster. Anything under 5 seconds, you're not going to feel the difference. Yeah, it's ridiculous to even talk about it.
It's going to be really impressive. And so, okay, we've proven that electric motors deliver max torque at 0 RPM, right? And they're heavy, so they have they have fewer traction issues, and you can make them all-wheel drive. So, yes, a quick 0 to 60 run in an electric car is possible. Moving on.
And the Bolt, it's relatively tall for its footprint size, which makes it very roomy inside. But because you've got a big chunk of the weight, you got almost 1,000 pounds of the 3,700 or 3,600 pound weight, in the floor. It corners very flat. It's really a lot of fun to drive. And, I think it's probably all around one of the best cars that GM makes today. And, one of the best cars you can buy today.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. I mean, I'm sure it feels well screwed together and solid to drive on the road. It rides and handles competently. And, were there any rough edges? What looking around, and certainly it's at a different price point too. So it's
sure. I think the one place where I think some people might complain about it, certainly it's not as sleek looking as a Tesla, and if you compare it to the design of the Model 3, it doesn't have that sleek design of a Model 3. But on the other hand, it wasn't designed to be, like a sports sedan. It was designed to, it was aimed right at the heart of the market today, which is crossovers. So it's designed, it's being marketed as a compact crossover. Rather than as a car, and that's what customers want. And the one kind of flaw in the ointment, if you want to call it that, is a lot of the interior surfaces are hard plastics. They're not soft touch plastics, for a couple of reasons. One, trying to keep the cost to a minimum, but also, adding the padding for the soft touch surfaces adds weight, so they're trying to keep weight down as well. And they did a pretty admirable job of keeping the weight down in this thing. Like I said, it's about 3,600 pounds, with almost 1,000 pounds of that being the battery. So, it's very weight efficient, for what it does. But even though it's hard plastics, they've done a really good job, I think, of executing those plastics. So, they've got some nice texturing on the surfaces. They've got nice combinations of colors, inside. So, when it doesn't look like a luxury car, but it also doesn't look cheap.
But do you think
it's not,
I'm sorry. Do you think that the fact that it's not a premium car, right? It's sort of like it's the normalization of the long range EV, right? Do you think that hurts it, that it's not a luxury car?
No, I don't think so at all. Because, one of the things that, Tesla's got, almost 400,000 pre-orders for the Model 3, which is going to be in the same price range as this thing. But I think, one of the things that we haven't really seen is what the final interior of the Model 3 is going to look like. And it's probably a safe bet that it's not going to look or feel like a luxury car either, because they're going to have to make some choices in order to try to get the cost down in order to be profitable, and compete and be able to survive as a company.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a lot harder for Tesla than it is for.
Oh, absolutely. Because, they don't have conventional powertrain, internal combustion vehicles, that are profitable to offset the costs of selling EVs. They're not a full line automaker the way GM or, most other incumbent automakers are. And so, GM can offset some of the extra cost of the batteries, compared to what Tesla can do, or Faraday, or Lucid, or any other company that builds nothing but EVs. So, I think it's going to be very interesting to watch. GM is, so far they've launched the car in California and in Oregon, and over the next 5 or 6 months, they'll spread it out to all 50 states. So by the end of the summer, you'll be able to buy a Bolt anywhere in the United States. And one of the advantages of that is that GM, has dealers in all 50 states, unlike Tesla.
And they have sales. You're right. Sales, like franchise.
Sales and service. So when if you need service, if you for whatever reason, just regular maintenance, you can take it into any Chevy dealer and get it serviced, which is something you can't say about Tesla. And frankly, Tesla, so far with the Model S and the Model X, has not developed a particularly good reputation for quality and reliability. They've had a lot of issues, and it's going to be a lot tougher for them to improve on that when they're building, 10 times as many cars.
Well, yeah, and the early adopters.
If they don't have
early adopters are much less tolerant. I mean, much more tolerant.
They're much more tolerant, and people who buy high-end cars also, are much more tolerant of flaws in their cars because they usually have other cars that can drive. And even now, with limited volumes of the Model S and the Model X, there are reports of people waiting, several weeks, to get warranty work done on their cars. So that's going to be a real problem that they're going to have to deal with, with the Model 3 when they start cranking up the volumes. And that's something that GM already knows how to deal with. So, for other manufacturers, they're going to have a distinct advantage over Tesla, I think.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, too, you can buy one now. And by the time you can get them in 50 states, are you going to even be able to get a Tesla Model 3?
No.
Right. So that gives them sort of an advantage, almost like early mover advantage in the affordable EV market. The key is going to be whether they can successfully motivate people to buy them. And this is the challenge, I guess, with any model, but especially because, they don't have the cachet of Tesla. Regardless of how good the engineering is and how much it's actually a benefit that it's Chevrolet and they're part of GM, and that brings with it actually a lot of positives for developing this kind of car. How are they going to sort of push back against something that's just, it's a premium brand. It's sort of like, when you're talking about Beats headphones versus something that actually sounds good, like there's going to be a lot of, pushback on sort of fact versus emotion. And, that's I'm not sure how GM's going to.
And there's plenty of emotion around the Tesla brand.
Yeah.
Which, is good for them.
Yeah, and some of it's warranted, they certainly did a thing
absolutely.
that has pushed everybody else. It's kind of like the NSX, right? The original NSX is why Ferraris and Lamborghinis got so accessible and good.
Yeah. Well, at least good.
Good. Yeah.
I don't know about accessible.
Sure.
They're a lot more expensive today than they were 25 years ago when the NSX came out.
Well, yeah, all right. I'm thinking like the Gallardo, right? The Gallardo wasn't that expensive.
Yeah. Okay.
Look, if you're buying that kind of car, yes, it's not. Just work with me here. Anyway, keep the analogy going. You talked to somebody actually. You gave me some interviews that we can cut into the show.
Yeah. So why don't we'll include interview with Stuart Norris in this week's show, because we're already running kind of long, and then we'll save the other two with Steve Majoros and Adam Heisel for next week, and tack those on to next week's show.
How do we want to tee them? So we're going to talk about the Bolt with Stuart Norris. How do we want to tee it up?
Yeah. So I had a chance to talk with Stuart Norris, who is the managing director of the GM Korea Design Studio. And the GM's Korea studio took the lead on doing the design work on the Bolt. They've been responsible for most of GM's small cars in recent years, and they did the Bolt. And I had a really good conversation with Stuart about what were some of the design decisions that went into this. Why did the car come out the way it did? And so let's listen to that, and then for next week we'll have Chevy's marketing manager for small cars and SUVs, Steve Majoros, and also propulsion calibration engineer Adam Heisel. Okay, Stuart.
Yes.
Let's see. Talking with Stuart Norris, who is the design director at GM Korea Studio. Is that
Yep,
right?
Managing director of design, yep.
Okay. And so you've been over there for about 4.5 years now, you said, and you've worked on the Bolt right from the very beginning of the project.
Yep.
What...
Lucky we came into the quiet interview lounge.
All right. So... one of the things that's interesting about the Bolt, first of all, is the package. Especially the obvious comparison everybody makes is versus Model 3, which Tesla has gone a very different direction with the packaging of that vehicle, which obviously has gotten a lot of attention. You guys have done more upright vehicle. What was the reasoning behind the packaging of the Bolt?
So clean slate, clean slate start to developing the package. So we work very closely between engineering team, the battery team, and the design team to kind of understand, with a certain amount of sort of energy density into the battery, how big was that going to be? The project started off with a very clear brief from Ackerson at the time, we basically said, 200-mile range, $30,000, fourth quarter of 2016. That's your goal. So from there, we just kind of worked on trying to define what we thought that vehicle needed to be to fulfill that brief, to kind of expand upon that. And then, so working basically with the battery team, the integration team, and the design studio, we basically looked at this, got this battery as flat as we could, drove the wheelbase out to kind of the 2600 dimension it is, we pushed the wheels out into the corners, and then we set about basically trying to set up an interior package for the vehicle. And we wanted it to have kind of, I won't go as far as to say SUV, but certainly a CUV-like seating position. So it's got a raised seating position, the chair height, so the height from your butt to the heel is somewhat elevated. Obviously we didn't want to make it too high. We didn't want to suddenly turn it into a really, really tall car. It's pretty tall as it is. We set that interior package volume up. We kind of set the occupant relative to the rear wheel. We were really driving for this C segment interior and a B segment footprint. Kind of a real packaging efficiency sort of model. And then we always liked the idea of the exterior of the car to be like a progressive CUV. So we didn't want to do a traditional sort of windshield to hood and upright windshield and upright A-pillar. We wanted it to be very fast, get the windshield far forward. And I don't know whether you spent time in the car, but I think one of the things we really took on board was this idea that instead of just styling a car, we wanted a kind of design and experience. And when you sit in the car, you've got that forward windshield, A-pillar forward, IP down. The belt is really low, so you feel super spacious inside the car. We put a bunch of efficiency into the floor console and the instrument panel, so your knee can spread and you feel like you're sitting in a much bigger car than you really are. And the view out and the vision out is really a unique experience when you look at that windshield touchdown position. So as a result of all that, we kind of pulled together this vision of what we wanted the car to be. And we wanted to be something different. I mean, I don't think we wanted it to be a traditional proportion and a traditional view of what the car should be. And so I think that's kind of how we kind of ended up with the package and the design that we have.
What sort of use cases did you envision for this car?
Mm-hmm. So we kind of went after it with this kind of I would say almost a utopian vision of like a next gen family car, and based on not a family car like a Tahoe, but a relatively efficient and compact family car. And we felt that once we'd done that, really once we'd kind of optimized it for that sort of lifestyle, then we wanted to build in flexibility and versatility into it. So the fold down rear seat, it's got the false floor in the rear with a fold down rear seat. So interestingly, we're staying in this house. The guy that owns this house owns a Bolt EV. He bought one after he started working with us. And he goes surfing in it. He can put a full surfboard right the way through the car.
Right, yeah, we saw the one in the garage. It's got that roof rack with the surfboard on there. Yeah.
So he was telling us that when he goes to like Half Moon Bay, he sticks it on the roof. But when if he's going into San Francisco and he needs to drive around, he wants to keep the board secure, he puts it inside the car, which is
slide the front passenger seat forward. And
I think he was sticking it between the seats.
Oh, okay.
So we kind of looked at it as this kind of very open, flexible interior space. We wanted that that ability to be able to take two adults and fairly grown up kids in the back of it. And then again, building in that kind of that versatility and flexibility with the seating and the trunk cargo space and so on. And I think one of the other things I love about the car is that you see so many electric vehicles that are kind of architecturally compromised because of they didn't have a dedicated architecture when they electrified the vehicle, and so you kind of shoehorn some batteries into the car. But because we were able to design a ground-up architecture for the vehicle unique to this car, there is no compromise in terms of the interior package. The trunk volume's huge. because we were able to architect the vehicle for what we needed it to do. I think also you'll look at when you get in and out of the car. We've got completely flat rockers as well. There's no rocker. You don't have to step into the car. You just slide straight over it. Which we always really pushed for. Easy ingress, egress. That raised seating position also helps that as well. So it's a very comfortable and rational product, but it's kind of executed in a very expressive and dynamic way.
I mean, obviously, in the years since this project started. Ride-hailing, Uber started about 7 years ago. But really, in the last 4 or 5 years, that's become something that's a really big part of the way people get around in cities globally. Not just here in the U.S. but everywhere. And how much did that play into some of your design decisions as far as the overall architecture of the car?
Yeah, I mean, so I think again that was you kind of asked about the scenarios for the vehicle. We'd always, from the very beginning of the vehicle, we kind of envisaged this as some kind of a taxi as well. We'd love the idea of being able to do, a volume vehicle that met a retail customer expectation, but also something that we could flex into either a shared or a taxi kind of environment. So, ingress, egress, the door openings are really good. There's no, you're not having to bend down and get yourself under the roof rail or anything. So we've got very good headroom, very good diagonal headroom. The glass is pretty upright, so you get tons of shoulder room. It's very easy to get 3 people across. In terms of materials and so on, obviously the seats are available in a fairly retail customer friendly execution, right? So we've got fabric and we've got leather, but the basic materials of the interior of the car, we try to create something that feels premium, but also something that's very robust and is going to stand up to the rigors of maybe a shared environment. So all the doors and so on, it's all it's a hard plastic, but they're executed, I think, in an expressive way that kind of balances that need between a retail customer and something in a shared environment.
And one of the obvious questions, I'm not sure if this would fall to you or maybe to somebody from the engineering team, the decision to go front wheel drive versus rear wheel drive, again, calling up the obvious comparison. What was there a particular rationale? I mean, since you have a dedicated platform for this vehicle that I'm sure it shares some components with other GM vehicles, but overall it's a dedicated platform. What was the rationale for going in one direction versus the other? I mean, did it make that much difference in terms of packaging?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, drive unit packaging. I think once you start putting drive units into a rear-wheel drive environment, then the rear suspension packaging. I mean, the overall package is a very efficient package. We've got a torsion beam rear suspension, which is an appropriate level of content for this vehicle. I think if you end up going into a rear-wheel drive environment, you suddenly have to drive yourself into multi-link rear suspension, which frankly, is something beyond what this vehicle segment really needs. And I think it all goes back to this whole idea of you've got a $30,000 price tag you want to get to the vehicle. Do you really want to drive a whole bunch of very expensive componentry into a multi-link rear suspension that this customer's not going to, then you're suddenly into a trade-off. So I think the whole idea of us adopting a more traditional front-wheel drive layout, helps us leverage what we've done for Volt and other things. This is a continuous development of a EV strategy for GM and for Chevrolet. Where we really build off the experience that we've taken from the Spark EV, the Volt 1, the Volt 2, and now into the Bolt EV. It's a logical extension of the strategy we've employed on those other vehicles.
Okay. And the 200-mile range, that was something that was one of the original targets, right?
Yeah.
At what point in the process? I mean, GM's talked a lot about their partnership with LG on this vehicle, and LG is supplying a lot of the systems in here. At what point did they come into this project and and start to get heavily involved with the GM team on this?
Since the very beginning of the project, so I think that maybe is part of the reason why, it's certainly one of the reasons why the vehicle development was done in Korea, so that we could leverage the location of the LG Chem team. But yeah, we've been engaged with LG since the beginning of the program.
Okay.
It's a real partnership. I mean, I won't go into all the detail of how we get there, but, basically a shared vision of being able to see a battery chemistry that can get you to that range, right? That's all part of the magic of how you put the car together, is that, on the one hand you can get the chemistry for the cell to deliver it, and then we need to do the work to develop the vehicle that's going to execute to that.
And this is obviously it's a global vehicle designed to be suitable for markets not just in North America, but everywhere in Asia and Europe.
Yep.
Were there any things, in terms of the design and the architecture, were there any things about that aspect of it being global that drove some of your decisions in the architecture and the design part?
I think increasingly, when people have when there's so much shared information about where the market is and where trends are, unless you get into very, very specific entries like an emerging market segment or full-size truck for North America and the Middle East or something like that, I think mostly when you're in a fairly mainstream segment of the market, requirements are fairly consistent between the big developed markets, and so I think a good package and a well-designed car is pretty palatable to a global consumer, and I don't think we've ever entered into doing something we say, that styling needs to be more appropriate for a Korean customer or a European customer or a North American customer. We do a lot of we do market research and globally do that market research, and our feedback is typically fairly consistent between the markets.
So would you say that design, what audiences in different parts of the world see as appealing in a car is somewhat, would you say it's converged over the last 15, 20 years?
Yeah, and I think it goes along with many other I think you see that outside of the automotive industry as well, where people want they want the same phone that the US market has, right? And they want, increasingly as you see social media and the internet and everybody being connected to seeing similar things, everybody kind of, that tends to drive tastes to become, not in a negative way, but it's more homogenized, and therefore customer expectations are quite similar within regions. We get into things, but like color is always very sensitive to markets, and especially it can become quite cultural as well, where certain colors mean something in a given market versus something else. But I think from a broad design execution point of view, you look at it throughout our portfolio, right? I mean, the Malibu is a global entry, has been for a couple of generations, and customers like the idea that they recognize this global vehicle that you can buy in the US and you can buy in Asia and you can buy in Europe. So I think there's a want that's driven outside of the auto industry as well.
Having spent several years in Korea now and being here before that, would you say that, or how would you say that working with studios in different parts of the world has influenced GM design overall?
As an organization?
Yeah.
I think the cultures are incredibly different. There is a tendency that I think the greatest value can come out from having people work in those environments. I think with the best will in the world, we connect at a leadership level, between the studios. But for individual designers to really get full benefit out of understanding our global footprint, there's a role on us as a leadership team to bring that culture, but also getting designers to experience work outside of their individual studio. I would say that, we have take Korea as an example. It's a fairly singular culture in Korea. 99.9% of my designers and team are Korean. But we've got a lot of them. There's a lot of Korean designers in the US, because very, very highly talented, very highly skilled, very well educated, and they're a mobile team. And they bring a very high tech approach. They're very, very tech savvy, know how to use all of the software tools that we have in the studio very, very effectively. And they bring a fresh perspective from a design point of view. Our designers see, Hyundai, Kia, Renault, Samsung, and SsangYong in Korea. There's that brings a different perspective in terms of the product design sensitivity. Also, proximity to China has a big impact. Every time I go to China, I'm just completely blown away by the sheer mass of entries and vehicles that are there. And it really keeps us on our toes, right? We're sitting there designing a car, and you go there and you're like, Jesus, this is the context of where this car needs to operate. We need to kind of, change tack to get this vehicle to really be able to work in that environment. Because you look at Europe and North America and Korea and Japan and other, very well-established developed markets, they're pretty stable, and the entries are fairly stable and the brands are fairly stable. But you go to China and it's just like...
It's changing so fast.
Oh,
You got
God,
new players
it's
coming
unbelievable. So I think, Korea being able to be quite close proximity to that and getting connected to that is very helpful. And then there's the North American, the US kind of car culture is quite different. And then, how we're moving into these new spaces like autonomous, which is very, very strong, I think, particularly in the US, the whole proximity to the technology side of things here and the tech companies that are getting engaged in that kind of stuff. I think it brings a really, really interesting global perspective to all of us.
Is there much opportunity for designers and also engineers from different parts of the world? I know a lot of the managers move around and work among different regions, but is there much opportunity for the main level designers to move around as well?
Yeah, we do. We sent probably 4 or 5 designers to work in the US for short-term business trips, like 6-month business trip or something. So there's pretty decent opportunity, and we work on global programs. So their exposure to European requirements, North American requirements, it's very, very clear. And when we're working on major global programs, we get people coming to Design Center to visit us, and so they get context there. Right. And then if we're working on something for one of the other brands, quite often we'll have designers come work with us to help us shepherd us through the kind of brand DNA of what we do, and vice versa. So there's quite a lot of movement of designers under the management level.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Neil. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, good talking to you.
All right. Well, it's GM Korea, that's Daewoo. Right, so that investment has paid off.
Former Daewoo, yeah. They've got a lot of the former Daewoo staff there, and in fact, the lead designer on this program, whose name escapes me at the moment right now, but she actually came out of Daewoo, and let's see,
to the Googles.
Find it. Yes. Well, actually, my email.
Oh, to the Gmail, which is the Googles.
Let's see. Sang-Yeon Cho, who is the director of GM Design. She works with Stuart at GM Korea Design, and she was the exterior design manager for the Bolt. And she and her team developed both the interior and the exterior of this car. And I think they did a fantastic job, given some of the constraints that they had. I think it's a really good looking vehicle for the type of vehicle it is. And, it's very easy to get in and out of, very comfortable inside, roomy. When you see it and you see this, that it's a relatively small vehicle. I mean, it's not tiny. It's bigger than, quite a bit bigger than, say, a Honda Fit. In fact, it's actually a little bigger than a Chevy Sonic. But it's very roomy inside, easily supports, 4 adults. In fact, Seth Myersma from Motor One, he was on the same wave of the drive program as myself.
And as everybody knows, he's like 7 feet 9 inches tall.
Yeah, well, he's like 6'6", I think. And Seth got in the back seat of the Bolt. He set the front seat for his so he could be comfortable, and then he climbed in behind there and still had room to spare. So, this is not, it looks small on the outside, but, it's got plenty of room on the inside for adults, and it's comfortable. We drove it for about 3.5 hours, and, the seats, provided plenty of support, and I was not fatigued at all in this thing.
Well, that's a highly complimentary outlook for the Bolt. I mean, see if it.
Yeah, I think anybody that's interested in in a smaller crossover, is also interested in going zero emissions, should really give this thing a look. As soon as your local dealer's got one in stock, go take one for a test drive. And Steve Majoros, the marketing manager, said that they're trying to do some creative things with the marketing on this. They're doing things like 24-hour loans for test drives, so you don't have to just go out and drive it around the block a couple times. You can actually take it and use it for your normal driving use, and see what it's like to live with.
Well, I mean, that's smart dealer practice. So good for them.
Yeah.
All right, good. Well, we'll come back to the Bolt next week. So in the meantime, do we want to talk Challenger GT?
Absolutely.
All right. So first of all, props to Chrysler for they put on a super nice program for this. And while this is going to sound like I was the typical auto journalist and you got wined and dined and treated like royalty. So what they did was they had us all start at the Press Hotel in Portland, Maine, which is a really nice place. And Portland's a cool city. And then we had about, I want to say 8 or 10 Challengers that we then set off from after they gave their presentation. We set off across Maine and into like central New Hampshire, just north of the lake. So there's a new place up there called Club Motorsports in Ossipee, New Hampshire. And they have it's a track. It's, a new facility. You have to be a member, but their track is like 250 feet of elevation change, and they have a go-kart track and stuff. So it was a cool place, and they had us. We had the Challenger GTs out on the go-kart track, sliding them around. And I actually have a little piece. I'll post it maybe as a bonus, so this podcast doesn't get too long. But me and Camille Kaluski of Hooniverse, we were trying to see how quickly we could lap one of the Challenger GTs, and I was his right seat driver for a little while. I was trying to sort of pass on some of the things I'd learned in high school about sliding a big car around in a tight space on the snow. But anyway, so the Challenger GT, I feel like this is Chrysler going or Dodge really just going like about that Giorgio platform that we don't have yet. We don't have it. And they took our trucks away. They took our minivan away. Everything we have is old, and they just killed our sedan, our C segment sedan. So we're left with not a whole lot. How do we even be creative and try to come up with something new? Because the key in the auto business, right, is if you don't have something new, you're done. Like you have nothing to announce. So first of all, what they did,
so you go to the parts bin,
right? And what they did was they looked at, okay, so the Challenger's biggest cross shop is not the Camaro or the Mustang.
Really,
it's the Charger. And likewise, the Charger's biggest cross shop. And this is all according to Chrysler. So, this is what they say. I paid attention.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense because, in that segment, of these, performance coupes, I think there's a lot of loyalty, and I don't think that there is a lot of crossover among the customers, so, people that are into Camaros are not going to buy a Challenger or a Mustang. They're going to buy a Camaro. Yeah. Similarly, Mustang drivers, are not even going to consider a Camaro or a Challenger. So it makes sense that Challenger drivers, if they're going to look for any alternative, it's going to be for basically the same thing with 4 doors.
And that's what it is. So they cross shop each other more highly than anything else. So the Charger's biggest cross shop is the Challenger. One of the biggest reasons for people not buying the Challenger and opting for the Charger or something else is that there's no all-wheel drive offered. So they said, well, shoot, we can do all-wheel drive. It's going to be less than a couple 100 pounds in the V6. The V6 is the one that sells the most anyway. That's not really hard for us to do. So they added the all-wheel drive system from the Charger to the Challenger, and they did some slick things with it, where, because sensor fusion is a thing. So it can engage all-wheel drive like on its own. It can engage the front axle when the temperature drops below a certain point. So taking off from stops is more confident. When it detects wheel spin, it can engage the front axle. But it does, or even in like an aggressive lane change, it'll go into all-wheel drive. Otherwise, it defaults to rear-wheel drive. So it has good driving dynamics. Nobody's ever going to complain that the LX platform doesn't have inherently decent, behavior. It's a nice, well-engineered driving experience, in my opinion. I don't know. Maybe you do differ, but
no, I agree with you.
It's definitely it's not the newest, but it's a solid car even now. And I like that
they've had a few years to refine its behavior.
Yeah, there we go. That's very diplomatic. No, I mean it's. The Challenger is different than the Charger in that, it's got a little less wheelbase, so it's actually a little bit more rigid, and its visibility sucks a little bit more. But it's still, it is this niche car, and they're actually calling it the first, it's a very qualified statement. Let me see if I can find it here. They give me a little press thing with their sort of talking points. They call it the world's first and only all-wheel drive American muscle coupe, which is kind of a mouthful. But yeah, it's a big coupe that can fit 5 full-grown people. It does have a big back seat. It's not like a Mustang or a Camaro in that respect. You can get real persons back there.
Okay, let me ask you a question though before you go on here. You said muscle coupe.
Yeah.
Which engine is in this?
Oh, the Pentastar.
GT?
It's V6 only.
Okay.
So
I mean, the Pentastar is a great engine, but do you think that qualifies it as a muscle coupe?
Well, I mean, it looks muscular. So again, though, this comes back to what we were just talking about with the electric cars, like 6 seconds to 60, like kind of thing, right? Like there's 305 horsepower here. You do have to wind the P out of it to get it, but there's also, almost 270 pound-feet of torque. That's not too bad. It's no slouch. It's fine.
Hey, when I graduated from college all those years ago and I bought my first Mustang, a 5-liter LX, it only had 220 horsepower.
Yes, and
that was a V8.
The 5-liter LX had 300 pound-feet of torque at like 3,000 RPM.
That's true.
So,
and it also weighed probably 1,000 pounds less than this Challenger.
Oh yeah, the Fox body was light. You kick it hard and sail across the parking lot. Yes. So, you put it in that terms, yeah. All right, it's got about as much torque as a 5-liter Fox body with about another 1,000 pounds on it. So it's it doesn't jump off the line, but it does not.
It's no Hellcat, but on the other hand, it's just like the Bolt. It's got plenty of grunt to to have fun with, especially if you live in the, northern climes, where the weather is not always as sunny as it is in Malibu. Having that much power and all-wheel drive could actually be a really good combination.
Yeah, it's fine. It's like I say, yes, I get your point. It's not necessarily muscular in the engine department. It does okay. And that's my assumption, is that they're being smart and they're saying like, all right, well, if we're going to build this thing, we got to sell it. What sells the most? The V6. Okay. So the V6 all-wheel drive is probably the most intelligent play there. I think if demand warrants, it's not a big deal for them to make a V8 all-wheel drive Challenger. I just don't think that there's going to be demand for it. And, somebody asked like, why no Hellcat? And it's like, the answer is, well, we're not going to comment on future product. I'm like, that's good luck making an all-wheel drive system that can stand up to 707 horsepower. Like you can do it, but why? First of all. And do you know how much that's going to cost? You might as well just. Well,
I mean, a Hellcat's not cheap either. So
I mean, it
what's a few thousand more?
Sure. It's and it comes sort of uniquely.
As long as you can undercut a Nissan GTR.
Yeah, I don't think you could with a Hellcat with all-wheel drive just stand up to it. Like you're going to be in GTR territory.
GTR's, base price of a GTR is over $100,000 now. So, Hellcat's what, low 70s? If you could sell an all-wheel drive Hellcat for 85.
You think you could do a much more beefy all-wheel drive system for just another 10 or 15 grand?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Even at low volume?
Probably.
Well, we'll have to get them on the phone. I was actually, so
how hard could it be?
I say do it. Give us, maybe we can get a dollar car and a Hellcat V8 from them, and we can put it together. See how long the V6 drive. Because I wonder too, like, does the Pentastar and the Hemi share the same bell housing pattern? I wonder. They would be smart to. Because they're
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they do. I mean maybe not. Yeah, they probably don't actually.
Wow. Well, we'll figure this out.
But with enough desire, anything is possible.
We'll make an adapter plate. It'll be fine. It's fine. And of course we'll use it like a Tremec 6060 or something too, because they're automatics for the birds. I feel like our project just got a lot more nichey and very expensive. They do equip it well too, though. Like, the challenge is, one of the nice things about it is like it does feel close in the interior, but the interior is pretty nice, especially for $27,000 to $33,000 sort of entry price. It starts at 27. I think the Challenger itself starts at 27. So the Challenger all-wheel drive is a little bit, I forget actually. So anyway, it starts around 30. How's that? That's better.
That's actually a real bargain.
Yeah.
For what you're getting.
Yeah, it's a solid, comfortable car. It looks good. All Challengers look pretty good, even the base models. They give you 19-inch wheels. They give you the park sense and the rear view camera and fog lamps and a little deck lid spoiler. And these cars also had the GT interior package, which I guess what they did was they grabbed the sport seats and put them in the V6 car, or they grabbed the SRT seats and they put them in the V6 car for the first time. I guess this is the only place you can get these seats in the V6. Or what I mean, they're very, very comfortable. Like I drove from Ossipee, New Hampshire back to Portland, Maine, which is it's a bit of a drive through the hinterlands where the vacationers don't ever go, and it was not fatiguing at all. The bolstering's nice. It's leather and Alcantara on those seats, and they had the Alpine audio system and the performance steering wheel. What I noticed the most was as we were hooning these cars around, they still have that weird T-handle shifter. And so like we would spin out every now and then. And so you'd go to throw it in reverse and you wind up in park. And you'd be like, what the hell? So their shifter sucks. But if you can not get in trouble with it, it's fine. And it's a big car. It's a heavy car. The all-wheel drive works really, really well. And I can say that from the standpoint of having shut off all of the skid control and basically drifted it around a circle and then a handling course and the kart track as well. If you get it a little bit mired in deep slushy snow, and this was not with winter tires, this was with Primacy MX4s or something. So really like economy crap tires. One of the tricks to it was you just, it almost feels like it's stuck or it starts to slide. You just aim and put your foot down and it'll engage the front axle and just sort of pull itself out of stuff. It was very impressive. And I know it's the same as the all-wheel drive Charger in that sense is, that the all-wheel drive system is effective. And it's not a high horsepower car though. So I'm not sure how much better it is than the rear wheel drive Challenger with snow tires, say, in these conditions, which probably would also be pretty good because it's a pretty stable, steady handling car. You put the right tires on it and it's fine. But that little edge of the front axle being able to be engaged gets you out of trouble where you'd otherwise get stuck. Still understeers if you're not careful.
And actually, one of the nice things about the all-wheel drive system that Chrysler uses on the LX platform is that, when you're driving on the highway, on dry roads, or just driving around on dry roads, it actually completely disengages the drive to the front axle, so you're not getting a lot of extra drag, so it significantly reduces the drag, so gets you a little bit better fuel economy as well.
Yeah, they call that, when they gave us the presentation, it has an active T case, and I was like, okay, transfer case, yep, got it, okay. But yes, it does. It has a little display in the gauge panel that shows you, whether the front axle is engaged or not. And so, yeah, it defaults to rear wheel drive. So that's very pleasing for people who like to drive, and, all the other stuff that has always been pretty good about the Challenger, including the interior that they updated. It's still a solid product. And I almost feel like it's with, the consolidation of some of the other coupes that were around when this was introduced, you can't get the Infinity Coupe, not that they're really in the same category, but it's kind of in a class of its own to a certain degree. There's no all-wheel drive Mustang. That'd be interesting.
No. But you will soon be able to get a hybrid one. So
yeah, which is also interesting. But so so it starts at $33,395,000 destination charge. So $35,000. You want to add the other interior package, it's another $1,000. This is like looking around going, well, we've got the Journey, the Durango, the Charger, and the Challenger. I think that's it.
Yeah, for the current Dodge lineup. And the Journey's probably going to get replaced hopefully within the next year or so.
Because there's a new Compass.
Well, there's the Compass. I mean, the Compass is smaller.
Well, but the Compass and the Journey and the Compass, the original Compass and Patriot were all the same platform.
No.
The Journey was a stretched version of it. It's the Project Global. It's the Caliber.
Yeah.
I forget what it was called.
Okay, yeah, you're right. It was that platform.
PMMK.
Yeah. And it's not clear exactly what Chrysler's plan is right now. Back when they did their last 5-year product plan, they talked about a new Dodge crossover, which it was probably be based on the Pacifica platform. So it would probably be a shorter version of the Pacifica platform. But, if they do that, that would be, that would actually be a really good combination to have. Mm-hmm. So you have something a little bigger than a Cherokee, but smaller than a Durango.
Well, and more efficient than the Durango too. I like the Durango, but it's, man, that is one thirsty beast. It's a good car. I mean, I'm just impressed that, Chrysler has consistently worked really hard to make the most of what they got. And I can't really say anything bad about the Challenger. Like if you're not into the Challenger, that's fair. And I do wonder what the story is with the Giorgio-based replacement that's supposed to come. Is it going to be called the Barracuda? Is it going to be smaller? Is it going to be rear-wheel drive? I mean, I have questions, and it sounds like those are either going to be here for like 2019 or 2021. So I don't know. Chrysler is kind of a moving target here, and I'm really not sure sort of what they're doing with Dodge at this point. Splitting the trucks off is like, okay, so you gave Ram its own profit and loss statement because they're a new brand now, and that's good for Ram, but it's not good for Dodge. What was that move about? And yeah, I mean, they took away some profitable things from Dodge and just moved them off. So, I mean, these cars are old and amortized and profitable still if they keep selling. So, yeah.
And, they keep, adding new tweaks to them. At the New York Auto Show in April, we're gonna get the Demon, which sounds like it's basically a drag race, essentially a street legal drag racer version of the Challenger.
Yeah, it's just sort of like the drag pack Mustangs. So, yeah, I mean it's creativity on display for them to, get some life out of a product that I'm sure they all expected was not going to be hanging around this long. So they're doing the best with what they got. I'm not sure what more there is to say about it. So I think I'll just stop saying stuff at this point. Yeah.
All right. You want to hit some questions?
Yes, because it's getting late. And I want to get back to see who else got fired in the federal government. So let's see. We had a question about the Hyperloop. Not that we know much about it, but we can riff on that. Let's see it came in via Twitter, and it was let's see. Normally not a Hyperloop fanboy, but could we touch on the SpaceX Hyperloop competition this past weekend?
Right. So the competition that they had over the weekend was basically for groups and companies that were designing the pods that will travel inside of these tubes. And let's see, I guess out of the various competitors, they started with 27 teams going into the weekend, and they picked 3 finalists that are going to continue on to actually get to test full scale versions of their pod in the test tube that somebody
test tube.
In the testing tube that has been built in California. And it's far from clear, that this will ever actually be something really viable. There's so many unanswered questions around the whole concept. So, I think until we actually see something real running, at full scale, we can't be sure that this is ever going to be something useful. There's all kinds of questions, around the rate of acceleration and, last year at the SAE World Congress, when I talked to Brogan Van Brogan, one of the the founders who's now been ousted from Hyperloop Technologies, he talked about how you get the pods in and out. Is this just a single point to point thing? And he described it as having stations along the way, along the length of the tube. So kind of described it kind of like packet switching on the internet, where individual pods could enter the tube and get off at various exits, essentially. But, for these things that are going, speeds of upwards of 700 miles an hour, it's exactly how this is going to work is still far from clear.
Yeah. Well, and the judging criteria, I guess, for this round is maximum speed with successful deceleration, I guess, if I'm reading this correctly. This is Hyperloop Pod Competition 2 rules and requirements. I just like the whole technology to me is it's a pressurized tube, or is it a vacuum? They run. Do they run in vacuum? Right?
It's in a vacuum.
Yeah. Good luck with that. To just achieve and maintain a vacuum of that much volume?
Yeah, over a tube that's running for hundreds of miles.
And like, how much energy is that going to consume? Like, I don't know. Like, it's very interesting to me. And I think, what this is it's kind of brilliant for SpaceX to be almost outsourcing R&D at this point, and the schools that compete in it get something out of it too. First, for sure.
Yeah, certainly, for students, these kinds of engineering challenges, these engineering competitions are a great way to, exercise all of the skills that you're going to need in engineering, once you graduate, everything from project management to design to actually executing this stuff. So, I've when I was in college, I competed in the Formula SAE program. SAE runs a bunch of different competitions, student design competitions. So anything like this, is a great opportunity for anyone studying actually any number of disciplines, from engineering to business and accounting, because you need all these different skills to execute any kind of major project, all working together. So it's definitely, even if the Hyperloop never amounts to anything real, just trying to do something is worthwhile.
Yeah. And so the outcome of it was 3 teams made it through all the criteria because they sort of did a sanity check on the designs as well as a bunch of other criteria to actually allow them to run. It's a 1 mile test track. Team from MIT, one from Delft University, and one from I want to say WARR, WARR, which is apparently
I'm looking at the Ars Technica article right now.
Technically,
and that last one got up to 58 miles an hour.
Right. So it's they're saying 90 kilometers per hour. So the top speed that they want to get them to is, like you were saying, 700 miles an hour, or a little bit lower. 300 kilometers an hour is apparently the speed that they're trying to shoot for, but can't do that over.
Well, I think the 300 is for the next phase of development. Yeah.
Okay.
Ultimately, I think they want to get over 700.
That'd be interesting. I mean, flying is about 700 miles an hour. It's a little slower. It's like about 6.
Yeah.
Because 700 miles an hour, that's above the speed of sound. So yeah.
That's right around the speed of sound.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. In the vacuum,
on the other hand, when you're running in a vacuum tube,
right?
Then the speed of sound is going to be quite a bit higher.
Right.
And sonic booms aren't as much of a problem inside of that tube.
What is I guess hopefully. It depends on how deep of a vacuum you pull. Because I was going to say, what is the speed of sound in a vacuum? Versus.
Yeah, it depends on the pressure.
Yeah. Well, we're getting very geeky.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
But that's what we do.
Yeah, it's interesting technology. I mean, Elon wants to build tunnels. And I'm like, well, didn't you already talk about that with the Hyperloop? Because apparently he got stuck in traffic. And he's like, no, I'm serious. We're making a tunnel company. We don't know what we're doing, but we're going to make a tunnel company. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to replace automotive transportation anytime soon. So there's that. All right. I don't have anything more to say on that. Do you?
No.
Okay. The other question we had, and we kind of try to keep politics off the show a little bit, just because it's kind of a minefield, and I could go on for quite a while. But we had a question about Uber versus Lyft with regards to the demonstrations that just happened over the immigration ban this Saturday. Uber at first was like, well, no cabs running because the cab drivers in New York held a temporary strike. So Uber was like, oh, no cabs running, take an Uber, which was kind of despicable, quite honestly.
Yeah, well, Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, is just a generally despicable human being anyway.
Right.
So.
And we were talking about this at work too. It's like I expected no less from Uber because they're terrible, terrible people. And they've proven over and over again that they're terrible people. And, if they had any sense and any compassion, their smartest move, which Lyft actually sort of swooped in and did some of this right in that sense. Their smartest move would have been to say, hey, we're Uber. We have a hugely overinflated market capitalization, so we can probably afford to make all these rides free, continue to pay our drivers for them, make an announcement about it, and, bask in the great PR. Instead, they bungled it, and then, Travis Kalanick had to come out and, release this long statement that says, like, yes, fraternity, solidarity, and all this stuff. And it just rings hollow. And, I get the question with Lyft, because they donated $1 million to the ACLU, but backers from Lyft have included Peter Thiel and Carl Icahn and others. If you look at Lyft's Wikipedia page, because that's where real research happens, there's a lot of underwriters for Lyft. GM invested a bunch of money, like $500 million. Lots of others.
One of their original investors was a company called Fontanellis Partners, which is the venture capital firm started by Bill Ford, the executive chairman of Ford Motor Company. So he doesn't actively manage any of the investments, but he puts a lot of his own money into that fund. And Fontanellis has invested in a lot of companies in the mobility space. So Lyft was one of the companies that they've invested in.
Yeah, it seems to me that Lyft's management is separate from some of its underwriting and some of that in those ways.
And that's usually the case, for most of these startup companies, on the flip side, one of the major investors in Uber, or a couple of the major investors in Uber, are Google Ventures.
Well, Jason Calacanis and for Uber too, right?
Yeah. And Toyota.
Yeah. Well, personally, I think Uber is terrible people, and I have refused to use their service, and I will continue to refuse to use their service because he's, from the top down, fish rots from the head down, right? And it's just not good. So I won't do it, and I didn't expect them to be classy, and they certainly fulfilled my expectations.
Yeah.
It's a good thing they don't sponsor the show. Yeah. So, all right. Well, yeah, we're this is gonna be like a 2-hour podcast once I cut that interview into it. So we should probably call it a night.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we'll come back later in this week and do another one, because it's a Monday right now, and I know we had a little bit of period of time in between. So yeah. Anyway. Please give us some feedback on Facebook, some reviews on iTunes. You can catch me on Twitter at Boston_auto. Sam is at Sam Abul. I screwed up all the time. Abul Salmon is what you said, right? Sam Abul. I can't do it. I'm on the spot. Damn it.
Sam Abul Salmon on Twitter. Just spell something close to that in Google, and you'll usually find my name.
Yeah, Abul Salmon. There we go. Yeah. See. That's okay.
You've known me for 10 years,
I know, but I've never been able to pronounce your name because, so first of all, what I want to do is make it, Samid, because that's how it looks.
Well, technically, that is the correct pronunciation.
I'm just showing my ugly American side, apparently, where I can't do anything but mangle names. Anyway, we will catch everybody next week, and thanks for listening.
All right, see ya.